the spiritual search is first awakened in a mind stream, well, there are two parts to it. There is the elation of the possibility, or the glimpse, or the taste of what is beyond what one has thought of oneself. And then usually there's the deflation of ever meeting that possibility, based in the conditioned belief that oneself is the limited mind stream in which this awakening is appearing. Did you follow that? Because it took a turn, so let me know. So that's just the way it is. There's nothing wrong with that. It's in fact can be that sense of deflation that's a kind of fuel to keep on searching, to keep on investigating, to keep on discriminating, so that the ripening can occur, so that there can be true search. So that in that true search there can be real discrimination, so that one can begin to look at one's life deflated with the possibility of what was promised in the initiation of the first spiritual yearning. So there's nothing wrong with that. There's a point in the search and in the discrimination where, through some mystery, some unbelievable luck or grace, something that can't really be equated to what was done or practiced or understood, where something cracks through the deflation, cracks through the yearning and the searching. And the peace and joy and silence that is beyond any understanding or any thought or even any experience is realized, and realized to be who one is. In the past, I have referred to this moment as the essential experience. And that's good enough. I'll continue that. It's not exactly right, but it's good enough. It is an essential experience. And in that, the deflation disappears. So the identification with the hatred of the body, or the hatred of the mind stream, or the hatred of the universe, or the hatred of life disappears. And this is it's a glorious moment. It's a moment of hallelujah. It's a roar, a shout. Now, everyone in this room, to some degree, has experienced that. You could not be in here, or maybe you could be here for the first time. But even that, I say, is proof that at some point, remembered or not, that has been experienced. And that's wondrous. That's the confirmation that our meeting is about. And the challenges that then arise are what our conversation is about. So let me say, at this point, that it is my great joy and privilege to confirm that in you. And it is also my joy and privilege to challenge that. So that in the challenge there can be the deeper confirmation. One of the powers of mind, the mind stream, is that when there has been a penetration, when there's been an opening and a revelation that is beyond what could have been thought or understood or learned or reached, the mind will very quickly, in its power and beauty, weave around that, make that its own. So then rather than deflation, we have inflation. Rather than the deflated ego, there's then the inflated ego. Or some people have referred to it as the enlightened ego. We know it as megalomania. We can see it throughout history, worldly history, spiritual history, it doesn't matter, same history. And you know it in your own experience. The driving force of deflation is to get out of the deflated state because it feels horrible. The worthlessness, the self-hatred, the limitedness, the misery, to get out of that. And the driving force in inflation, of course, is to keep that, because it feels very good. I am limitless being. I am the one. I made it. I got it. I am it. Of course, it takes an enormous degree of maintenance. And often when people ask me the question, how to maintain the true state of revelation, it's really, they are asking the question, how do I maintain my inflated state of myself? Because I like it. It feels great. Right? Right, you know that. It's nothing wrong with that. I'm not speaking of right and wrong right now. I'm just speaking of the way it works. So the first challenge is to allow the deflation to be penetrated so it can be disappeared in a moment of grace. Not that you can disappear it, but it can be disappeared. And of course that is achieved. Well, who knows how it's achieved? However it is achieved, it is beyond the deflated ego's capacity to achieve it. And it is also beyond the inflated ego's capacity to hold the living truth. All that the inflated ego can hold is a thought of the truth, a thought of beauty, a thought of peace, and a thought of silence, a thought of who one is. It's a big thought, and it's a huge thought, and it even points to reality, but it remains a thought. So in our meeting, I do invite you to give up both deflation and inflation. And if you find that you don't want to give up inflation, you're happy to give up deflation, but you don't want to give up inflation. It's just feeling good. It took you so long. This is exactly the state I was in when I met my teacher, when I met Papaji. And I said to him, I'm really afraid that I'm going to lose this, that now finally feels good. And he laughed and laughed and laughed. And he said, it's only because you still don't recognize yourself as the consciousness that holds it all. And when he said that, I recognized that as I had identified myself as a seeker and going to get out of my suffering, going to stop my ego's games, going to do this, going to do that, I was perpetuating the cycle. His initial and final invitation to me and to you is to stop. To stop deflating and to stop inflating. You may not even be aware of the thoughts that go with the deflating or the thoughts that go with the inflating. But if you are not aware of the thoughts, you're aware of the feelings. You're aware of the posture. It's familiar territory, both. One feels horrible, one feels great. But both have weight. And both are lies. The living truth does not belong to any one. There is no one who is more the self than another. There is no one who is more empty than another. There is no one who is more silent than another. And I'm happy to stand on this stage above you to tell you that. That's the paradox. And our time, whether it's this one time or many times or never again, our time is about that. You are the consciousness that holds it all. A force of thought, a force of conditioning is tremendous. It goes back millions of years. And yet that force, too, gets its power from the truth that is consciousness. And without understanding a thing, you already know this. You can discover that by, in this moment in our time together, letting go of all of your understanding. All of it. And then simply being who you are. If there is understanding, let it come from that, not lead that. If there is a particular way of being, let it come from that. If there is a ritual or a practice, let it come from that. If there is a song or a dance or a book or a painting or a composition or a life, let it come from that, where it comes from. Then the let it is simply the mind's opening again, rather than closing around, I gotta get it, I gotta keep it. Let it.
I've been able to get increasingly aware of how, when I see through the lens of my mind, ego, trouble.
Trouble, that's right.
And I have this longing to manifest more love.
Trouble.
Trouble. I know, because that feels like another level of ego.
It is. It is. It's the love manifesting ego.
I mean, I can.
It's better than the hate manifesting ego on the level of ego.
Because I want to be able to love the world and my husband.
And if that
perfectly.
happens, okay, so let me ask you two parts of that. What does this perfect love look like?
It's like never having PMS and being a bitch.
Yes, that's right. That's right. It means being a very good girl all the time. Yes. This is the corruption of what is taught. This is a really deep corruption. And so the goodness in you hates the badness. This is not good. This is ego.
Yeah.
Saying, I'm good, why can't that bad, ugly part go away and never bother me again so that I could be this perfect manifestation of love to the world, my husband. Did you say child also? No.
What else is the point of all this? Isn't the point of all this to purify our love so that we can just be pure love?
Well, that's the result of it. But if it's made the point of it, it's a point that you're forever chasing. You understand? Probably the point of it, probably the Dalai Lama said the point of it, the very best of all, and that's just to be kind. But you find you aren't more kind when you are trying to manifest pure love and things keep getting in your way. Whether it is outside things or internal things, they are bothering you. They are bothering this pureness. Yes, that's right. That's right. For a moment you can see that without taking it seriously, because it's not so rooted in you that you're a fascist yet. But that's the direction it takes, finally. It's a spiritual fascism, which is not different at all from political fascism or Nazism. We need to purify. We need to get rid of what is, from my point of view, is seen as ugly or less than or crippled or dwarfed or colored, or it just must be a lily white, no stain, right? That's what the soul is. You want this pure soul. That's what we're taught the soul is.
I feel like what I really want is to see everything as the self and myself, and I keep separating from that.
Because you keep seeing the self as this lily white thing.
Yeah.
Good thing.
I mean, I feel like sometimes I can accept
That's
just the
half the
humanity and the...
You can?
Yeah,
Excellent.
sometimes.
And in that moment of accepting just the humanity of it all, what's present?
No thought.
And what's the experience when no thought about what's happening, just the acceptance of the humanity?
Just peace.
Just peace.
Yeah.
That's right. That's the result.
Yeah.
And that peace is not, well, it is the point. But if you go for that peace, then you go to war. Right? I mean, you know this from your own experience. If you don't know it from your own experience, just read history a little bit. It's replayed over and over and over. Me and my peace, and who's disrupting that peace, and what I need to do to set them straight so that they will stop, and how that escalates. Oh, up, up, up. And this is external, obviously, and it's internal, obviously. You're speaking of the internal war. So then if you are willing to be both human and divine, both limitless and limited, both pure and defiled, both right and wrong, both ignorant and enlightened, then the story has to stop. But if you decide, oh no, I can't settle for both. I have to have one above the other. Because that's the way I will know that I have succeeded. I have won. This is ego.
It's exactly like that. I was feeling that I hadn't accepted the invitation until I let go of all the defiled parts.
The criteria for how you've... Oh, the defiled parts.
You know.
Right. So you mean some nasty thought would arise, or some hormonal surge would happen, and you would speak negatively, or think a negative thought, or... Yes.
And then made me think, oh, I've been all these sad songs, and yet I haven't... I wanted to, ask you, how do I accept the invitation?
So then on top of that was bad girl, bad girl, bad girl.
Yeah.
You don't get the bone, bad girl. I have to go ask Gangaji how to be a good girl so I get the prize. But what I'm saying to you is you either give up both the bad girl and the good girl, or you accept both the bad girl and the good girl, because if you really accept both, you've given them both up. Anyway, to accept one, the other is given up like that.
I forget that the search is bogus, that it's all right here, right now.
But you remember right now,
Yeah.
I see it. Yes. Yes.
Even when the bad girl, there's nothing, it's just right here.
It's still right here.
Yeah.
Because God, or truth, or freedom, is not separate from this bad girl. And that's what we have been taught, that if you are bad, you're not close to God. You're separate from truth. And we're all bad. And if we don't act out our badness, we all have murderous thoughts. At the very least, we're cursing somebody sometime. And so then that, because of our training, we use that as the proof that we are in fact still separate. And on top of that, then there's a little beating, because that's the way the animal has been trained. You know, when children were brought up generations ago, they were beat. I mean, in my generation I was certainly spanked a lot. And I spanked my daughter. I don't think spanking is happening now. Maybe it is. But there was beating before that. Because that's the way you trained animals. You beat your dog, you beat your horse, you beat your mule, you beat your donkey. It's only in the recent times that there's been discovered you don't have to beat an animal for an animal to learn what it is you are trying to teach. You don't have to beat your children. You don't have to beat your horses. You don't have to beat your dogs for them to learn quite well. So this is revolutionary. And most of us are still living in this very old-timey way of how to learn. And that learning is based on being beat and beating. Isn't this right in your own mind? I mean, did you have a dog? You know, you spank the dog with a newspaper, right? Not to hurt the dog, but to let the dog know who's master. But you don't have to do that. You don't have to hurt to teach. And you don't have to be hurt to learn. So where that begins is with you. Are you willing to learn without being hurt? That's the opening. That's the opening, because a human being is not like a dog, even though it isn't. A human being is an animal. It's not like a horse. There's a particular capacity with the human being to take the master's instruction into itself. And so if the master is a mean master, it takes that into itself. If it's a master who was taught by its master to beat, so if the human animal learns, that gets internalized also. And that's a disease that this whole room is filled with. And it is especially true in spiritual seekers. So it's something, it's an edge that has to be met. Doesn't mean that you flip into the other side of a kind of rampant indulgence of the badness that appears. Because you have seen that if PMS strikes, or if some negative thought strikes and you act out on that, you cause harm. And you have seen if you act out on it internally, harm is also caused. The torture, the self-torture, the belief in this superego as being God's emissary that will help you get to heaven has to be cut. Doesn't mean you give up responsibility. It means you are willing to be fully responsible without a superego beating you, torturing you. It means you're willing to open to the badness too.
So I thought I wanted to ask you how to sever from my mind, which was causing all this trouble. I feel right now that I am severed from.
You see, because that question, when you had that question, that's when you were believing that superego part of your mind. I mean, what is it that's saying, I have to sever from my mind? Is this mind? Isn't this mind?
Yeah.
I have to sever from that. You got to respect mind. What a brilliant tactic. Papaji used to call this the thief dressing up as the policeman to guard the treasure. You know, it works for a while until you keep seeing you're being robbed. Then you throw him out. And you say, I am here. You fire the superego. You fire this bogus policeman. And then there's no question. That's the openness that I was referring to. That's the openness. It's so clear, so apparent. And there are obviously many challenges to it, just in the biology of the human being, in the life experiences, in relationships, in environment, in politics, all of it. Many, many challenges. And you can be fully participatory in all of that and recognize the truth of who you are. So when I speak of ego and superego, I'm speaking of voices or thoughts that appear, that represent you as who you are. And some voices say you're good and beautiful and wonderful, and it doesn't matter that the world thinks you're not. And some voices say you're horrible and ugly and miserable, and it doesn't matter if the world thinks you are beautiful, good and kind. So we call one ego, and then the authority over ego is superego. And in the surrender of that, there's a recognition that is only one self. And this voice is a wave, like a wave of thought that is appearing in the ocean of self. Has no reality separate from self, and is also only self. Does that make sense? I don't know who asked the question. It was a little note that was on the bulletin board, I guess. Yesterday we were speaking about desires and the consciousness of desires. First, they're just desires, playing themselves out. Physical desires, a desire for food in a baby gives rise to the strategy of crying. Food is then given, and then there's a groove that's, I get it. Cry, get food. Cry, get food. And then, of course, as a child gets older and is punished for crying when he wants food, that strategy or conditioning is modified to smile, be happy, say, Mommy, I would like some food. And this is very basic, obviously. And obviously nothing wrong with it. The body needs food. And you either get the food from Mommy or you go out and plant the food or club the food and get it for yourself and give it to your children. Sell it. It gets very complicated. It's a play of Leela then, play of society or tribal or family play. There's nothing wrong with that desire for food. It's the way the organism stays alive. Of course, even that desire can get totally obsessive and crazy, where it's all it's thought about. And then the superego comes in and adds to that obsession with how wrong it is, how you have to change, and there's a battle. Ego versus superego. But I want my food, but you've had too much food. But I want it, I'll be good. Okay, you can have some more if you're good, okay. Is this familiar? It's not just going on. So that's just the basic desire for food and the strategy, then for getting food, and then the interplay of when that desire gets out of balance. And then, of course, as a child grows up and becomes of age, that there can be babies made and the hormones kick in, there's desire for a mate. And the strategy to get a mate has to do with attracting or possessing, controlling. Attracting, possessive, controlling. And there are multiple strategies for that, as we all know, because this is a huge, certainly it's as large as the desire for food. Because this means just as the food is the guarantee that the organism will be alive, the desire for sex, procreation, is the guarantee that the species will be alive. So it's just as big. It's bigger than the individual, and it uses the individual for the continuation of the species and the evolution of the genetic pool. That's usually where most people stop. That one's so big. If they didn't stop at food, they stop there. And that becomes this obsessive, certainly in our culture, in the Western culture. I mean, you just have to look around and see. It's what every advertisement is saying. If you do this, if you buy this, if you look like this, if you take this, you will be more attractive. You will be able to possess more. You'll be able to control more. And that's a very adolescent desire. So within each person there are many, many avenues, strategies, where that desire is attempted to be fulfilled. Luckily, at some point, for some rare people, meaning you, there's a recognition that the fulfillment of those desires, while perhaps natural, while certainly natural, still don't touch a deeper desire, a longing. And perhaps as that mysterious longing first appears, it is attempted to be fulfilled through the strategies of acquiring food, survival, sex, power. But there's a disillusionment that sets in. And this can happen at any age, but at whatever age it happens, it's an age of maturity. It can be scary because there is a belief, oh my God, if I give up my love of childish pleasures or adolescent pleasures, what is life about? That's what life is. Because obviously the desire for food is linked into this is what life is. And then the desire for sex is linked into this is what life is. And there's no life without it. So the conditioning is very strong, very deep. But there is something stronger and deeper. And it is that will not be satisfied through any strategizing, through any possessing, through any attracting, through any controlling. That's the desire for truth. The desire for life itself. Not the perpetuation of life, not the continuance of life, but life itself. The desire for oneself. And this desire is blessed in its appearance. It is huge in some beings and just a little sparkling light in others. We gather together so that this desire can be fueled from each other, can be encouraged, so that the courage it takes to give up one's strategies that have been appropriate for food and sex, to give those up because they are absolutely inappropriate in the desire for truth. So you can cry and scream, and you have. Give me truth, and we can write poetry about that, like Rumi writes about that. Or you can try to be attractive to truth. In whatever way. I mean, I'm just doing that way, but there's also this way, and I'm so good, when will truth descend on me, or I'm bad, when is truth coming from me? And the many subtle, infinitely subtle, complex mandala of strategies, which you've all tried. You can go to the authorities, you can read all the books, you can do all the practices, but if you are doing them from this strategizing mind, from conditioned mind, you will continually reach a dead end. Because truth is free of conditions. And the disillusionment that I often speak of, that I invite, that I celebrate, is a recognition. Nothing I can do gets that. Nothing I can do keeps that. And the question that I get all the time, how to keep it, how to maintain it, how to live it, is really a question of, give me a strategy. My strategies aren't working. And Louis mentioned this strategy of discipline, which does work. Because when you realize that strategy, discipline, not the superego version of discipline, which is which everyone is very familiar with, but the discipline of stopping. Not stopping, but stopping. Then the desire itself immediately reveals its own fulfillment. Effortlessly. Because it is its own fulfillment. All along it is saying, here, here, here. while the conditioned mind is going there, 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 to find here, here, here. I had it, I glimpsed it, I tasted it. What can I do to get it back? Nothing. Okay, I'll do nothing. Great, I got it, I'll do nothing. It doesn't work. It's not the strategy of doing nothing. It's really doing nothing. And in an instant of really doing nothing, nothing is needed, nothing is wanted. And in the next moment, mind arises, great, that's it, I got it. So the discipline is to recognize that thought, that voice, not to recognize it as bad thought, wrong thought, get back down there, I told you to stop, but to recognize it and do nothing. Then instantly that thought is just a wave. It is a wave appearing in consciousness. Thought is a wave, a bubble appearing in consciousness. It can split. It has the power and magic to split into multiple waves and bubbles. And a war can start like a storm on the ocean, where some waves are going this way, some waves are going that way, and then the authority wave reaches up and says, this side is right and this side is wrong. And that side creeps off and then it comes back again, and alliances are formed. And yes, it is. It's great to laugh about it. It is great to laugh about it. It can be quite punishing, as you know, mentally, emotionally, physically, circumstantially punishing. But the clarity and the willingness to see and do nothing is the inherent power of consciousness. It doesn't mean see some child being abused and do nothing. That's the ego taking it and making it mean something. It doesn't mean feeling hunger and do nothing. That's been tried. That's been tried. It means, in this search for oneself, in this desire for true, lasting, final, complete, ever fresh, ever new, ever deepening realization, in this moment, do nothing. The main strategy, maybe it's the only strategy, of the superego is the system of rewards and punishments. Pretty primitive, but works. How you internally speak to yourself, how you speak to what appears to be others in terms of rewarding or punishing, either grossly or very subtly, must be seen. Otherwise, this thought form that says, I am the authority, I know what's right, I know what's wrong, operates unconsciously or subconsciously, and then just wins. The interesting twist about actually recognizing the activity in the mind of the superego is that if there is a battle that then is ensued with the superego, it will definitely win. It's designed to win because it's got God on its side. It's the authority. So whatever measly little arguments the ego can throw up, this is the superego. Case dismissed. But if there's a willingness to surrender in the face of both reward and punishment, the impulse to reward, the impulse to punish, the impulse to reward, the impulse to punish, just to surrender, to stop, to see it, to not struggle with it, to not fight with it, but to fully see it and to see the under it, the what may appear as an abyss, but is in reality the spaciousness. That this superego is just noise, sound, and fury, signifying nothing but conditioned existence, conditioned learning. But because it is the way that we as animals are taught, and we as human animals are taught, and we as a culture, both worldly and religious, are taught, it is very deeply ingrained. I really want to stress that there's nothing wrong with reward and punishment. They're very effective learning devices. Very effective. It's all in the appropriateness and the balance. When you are dealing with the desire, the longing for truth, then reward and punishment are distractions. Distractions of the mind. The mind is still assuming control. The mind is assuming the mantle of truth giver or of truth withholder. So how you train your dogs or your children or your co-workers or your students or your teachers, that's one matter. That's a certain level of operation. But regarding truth, it's out of the realm of the mind. Uncontrollably free. No reward can reward that. And no punishment can punish that.
I have a question about judgmental. Judgmental. Because that always comes up.
Judgmentalness?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's always a part of my training, you know. And then I say, well, who's judging? Mm-hmm. But it doesn't go away very easily.
Why does it need to go away?
Because it's uncomfortable.
Watch out, because generally, so first we get rid of the bad things because they're uncomfortable. But what if it's something really good? What if this judgmental habit has within it this treasure and you are pushing it aside because it's uncomfortable, because of course makes you judge yourself, that you're judgmental. But this is all the same imp, ego. What's wrong with judgmentalness? When there's nothing wrong with it, when you're willing for there to be nothing wrong with it, you can actually investigate it. It actually doesn't have the same power. Its power, certainly the power of judgmentalness, is based on right and wrong. Right? Just rationally speaking, without the power of this is right and this is wrong. Judgmentalness, it's not speaking of judgment now, but judgmentalness has no power. You follow this? Good. That's very good. You get A+ there. And those of you who don't follow it, bad, bad, bad. Judgmentalness, like other habits of mind, are part of the human condition. Having to do, if you investigate it, with some notion of survival. And survival being built on, I gotta be better than the next person. And then the recognition, oh my God, there are so many that I'm not better than. And so then the judgmentalness clicks in. Well, I'll find ways that I am better than they. Or vice versa, if it's like perverted in a certain way. I will continue to find ways in which I am worse than they. It's the same deal. One's inverted and the other's extroverted. But do you understand what I'm saying? So if you are willing for there to be nothing wrong with this habit of mind, I'm not saying it's right, but it's nothing right and nothing wrong with it. It is a habit of mind. You follow me? Because this is a big one with most people. With most humans, anyway. In particular, humans. Maybe other species have it, but it's a hallmark of the human condition. Because humans are better than other species or the nature, right? And that therefore means humans get to survive at the cost of the whole planetary system. So this is a part of the human cellular information, knowledge. If it's met with, no, bad, wrong, because I want to be a spiritual human, then it's just covered, and it's a big mess. Every war we've ever had has been a spiritual war. Every one. The worst things happen in the name of spiritual. So what if there is nothing wrong with this pattern? There's nothing wrong with making wrong. Nothing right with making right. Nothing wrong with making wrong. At first you discover it's not right to make wrong. But that's the same thing, right? So, stay with me on this one. I have no idea where it's going. So just in a moment, a stark, naked moment, there's a willingness to see the entrenchedness of judgmentalness without pushing it aside, without covering it.
Being aware of it, watching it, you mean?
Being it.
Being it.
Not being judgmental, but being judgmentalness means really directly meeting judgmentalness.
Oh, okay.
And what is found in that meeting?
It's not important. It doesn't exist, really.
This is right. But don't learn what she just said. Erase that from your mind, because that's very good for the arsenal of the acting out of judgmentalness. You understand? So don't learn that. You just take this as, whoa, there's an insight that's there.
Mm-hmm. And then let go of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because anything will be used in the arsenal of ego. Nothing wrong with judgmentalness? Oh, great. Well, there have been a lot of people I've been really wanting to speak to lately. Nothing right with judgmentalness. Oh, then I shouldn't be judgmental. It's not a question of right and wrong. It's a question of judgmentalness and what it is covering, or what it is supported by, and what it is really, which you immediately saw. Really, it is nothing. What supports it is some strategy of ego. In the willingness to meet it, the strategy of ego is revealed. in that instant, the non-existence of ego is revealed. Ah, you see?
Thank you.
Quick.
It's really good to be up here.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
that's right. So our time together is not just a time in aha, 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 it's also aha. So this investigation is, the opening is the investigation, and the investigation is endless. As you said, or maybe you said it, I think you said it. Everybody I meet then is the deepening of myself. So this meeting is not something that happened in time someplace. Even though in our minds we have that in time, and that memory actually prepares us for this meeting now, for the value that's here now, in examining what has not been examined, in investigating what has been clung to, in realizing freshly this moment the truth of freedom. True freedom has no past, no history, no future.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, I feel myself going towards doing like a certain kind of work that involves, counseling and teaching and writing and things like this. And I feel very good about that work. I feel very natural, in that work. And it just seems like that's my dharma. That's what I'm meant to do.
You have affinity for that.
Right,
Excellent.
right. And at the same time, I spent some time focusing on just awareness, because I have not wanted to go into doing this work without awareness,
Excellent.
Yeah, and but I still have a sense of there being some kind of, there's still something. It's like I feel myself being drawn back out into this work, and it's sort of flowing in that direction.
In terms of skills?
Just going outward again.
Great.
And it's sort
Great.
of it's
Yes, I am never preaching a kind of life of introspection.
Right.
That may be, but that's not the goal.
Right. Right. And I guess what kind of concerns me is that I sense that as this movement is happening, and it feels very natural, that there's still some kind of ego, there's still some kind of ambition or compulsion or wound that maybe is manifesting in some lack of just clear resonance with spirit. In that.
What would be the problem with that now?
Well, it's okay, but at the same time, it's not what I would want to sort of aim for. It's okay.
So now this very thought or feeling, it's not what I would aim for.
Yeah.
This is what we call superego.
Yeah.
So there's a part of the mind that splits and calls itself God, or Father, or Mother, or Teacher, or Guru, and says, you shouldn't be like you are.
Right. I know that. Yeah.
Good. It's very important to know that, because this is really a great battlefield, especially in spiritual circles, because there is this superego that says the ego must go. Right? Who else cares if the ego is here or not? So if there is an ambition to get rid of all ambition, this is to be suspect. You see what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
If there's an ambition to be egoless, it's like ding, 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 ding. What's wrong with the ego? Who has a problem with the ego? Does God have a problem with the ego? Does awareness have a problem with the ego? Only ego has a problem with the ego. And it's a huge problem. It's a huge problem because it's ego imitating God. And that's called, well, we know what that is. It's Lucifer in Lucifer's kingdom. Right? It's the split from God and saying, well, I will give the orders. I will perfect this human being. I will purify this human being. And that's hell. It's hell. It's Lucifer's realm. Oh, that's the story that points to it. So in the welcoming, in the recognizing this Lucifer tendency, without then having then a super ego to throw Lucifer out of the kingdom, just welcome ego, ambition, needs, welcome it all into the consciousness that you are, in this moment. Into this moment. Then you can be this very limited human being with limited or karmic propensities that just get worked out, just get displayed. I mean, somebody asked me, do you really want to be speaking to all these people? And I said, well, I guess so. You know, I love it. I love it. Someone also who's recently started speaking to people, a person I've spoken to you about a lot, John Sherman, this man who was in prison for a number of years, 28 years, I think. Is that right? 14 years, maybe. 17 years. John Sherman was in prison for being a bomber in the 70s. And he's released. He's actually having satsang, and it's beautiful satsang. And he came up to me and he said, Gangaji, I just have to tell you, I'm a little worried. I'm really loving this. I said, well, I hope so. It's lovable. It's absolutely lovable. You cannot be natural in your life unless you are loving where your life is leading you. That's the affinity for it. That's why, as Ramana sat by the mountain doing nothing, he loved it. It's not like he thought he should be lying there on the couch. You get it? But we have taken that, the image of Ramana, or the opposing image of Christ in the world, and we think we should be doing what they are doing, and that thought is called superego. It's still ego, but it's a much more dangerous ego just than the natural functioning of the human life. So everyone is conditioned, culturally conditioned. Conditioned by your family, conditioned by your genes, conditioned by your last meal, just conditioned by what's in the environment. But the field, the vastness of beingness that conditioning is in, is the truth of who you are. When you recognize and are true to the truth of who you are, the conditioning itself serves that truth. It's not like, as I was saying last night, you have to send the conditioning off to the concentration camp. Conditioning is the conditioning. I can remember in the 70s here on Maui in particular, there was a certain sense of, it was a wonderful time, but it was kind of like, whoa, if I dress in white and I act like this, I really will be holy. I will finally be holy. And if I'm holy, I'll really be happy. And if I'm happy, everybody will love me. And if everybody loves me, I'll never be insecure again. And it's just an imitation of what is at the core of happiness and true security. That has nothing to do with the personality or the destiny or the karma. So as such a young destiny, maybe an ancient destiny, but a young body going out into the world, just be free in who you are. And then your mind, which is where the conditioning resides, is a servant to that. Then you have intellectual capacity. It's a servant to that. You don't stifle it because intellect will never get you there. Intellect is beautiful. It's the power of the mind, and it will never get you there. But as a servant, it's beautiful. You don't deny your talents just because you have experience being puffed up about your talents. You recognize the puffed upness and the absurdity of it, and then you sing, or you draw, or you speak, or you dance, or you cook, or you clean, or you socialize. You understand what I'm saying? We have made everything so complicated in the service of Lucifer, in the service of the superego. It's not that complicated. God welcomes all home. Consciousness is in all. So then there's an energy that's released. There's a life force where actually you are in the world and you are used beautifully. And your mind then makes use of experiences so that those experiences then can then be turned over to service. Not because service is good or you are doing service, but just because there's an affinity for it. A talent. A love. So I truly wish you well. I really wish you well. And I'm not saying that arrogance won't appear. It will appear. But it's so obvious when it appears. It's so obvious. Yes. And we try to make what made the arrogance appear go away. Just meet the arrogance. If you are fully, completely arrogant for 1 second, fully arrogant, you see without a doubt the absurdity of arrogance, the nothingness of arrogance, just like worthlessness. It's the same thing. It seems to me what I'm hearing here is there's maybe a fear of arrogance coming in. Usually it's worthlessness, but it's exactly the same. If you experience fully, completely 1 second of true, absolute worthlessness, worthlessness is nothing. Just a club of the superego. Nothing. But you run from worthlessness or you run from arrogance, and there's a constriction of the life force. And the superego then is in charge. And this is not enlightened, it's just the ego saying, now we're getting somewhere. Now we are making it. Back, I saw that you had a thought about ambition. Bad, bad, bad. Losing ground again. Only 80% free today. Back to the labor camp. So in being true to yourself and being true to what you love, there is a free falling, because there's no control then. And the mistakes will be made. Mistakes are perfect to be made. And there will be pain. And pain is perfect to be felt. You follow this?
Yeah.
Looks like it.
Thanks. Just wanted to, come up and just a way of really putting it at the feet.
Yes,
you know,
really
and so-
exposing it.
So, thank you.
I thank you very much for your whole life.
You too.
Thank you. See, really what I'm talking about, it seems like it's what I'm always talking about, is the difference in being true and imitating being true. So there's this hope in the mind. Of course, we'd never call it imitation. Superego, ego, mind has the power of great smartness. So we wouldn't say it's an imitation, but it is an imitation. Because there's a reference point based on thought. What is not imitatable is this that you discover up here, this vastness of being. You can't imitate that. You can only be that, and you already are that. So be who you are. And stop thinking, just for a moment, about what you should be doing, what you didn't do right, what you should have done. Just be still and be who you are. Then the release, the flood of your own radiance is undeniable.